Namaskar and welcome to World Today. I'm your host for the program. Mark Lynn is my name. And on the show this evening, we'll be discussing the ongoing Belarus-Poland EU standoff because of the migrants issue. But first, our headlines. India hits back at Pakistan for misusing the United Nations platforms to propagate false and malicious propaganda against India. Poland turns water cannons on migrants on the border with Belarus. NATO reiterates its support for Warsaw in a crisis that has left thousands stranded on the frontier in icy temperatures. The American journalist Danny Fenster has an emotional reunion with his family on his return to the United States after more than 5 months in a Myanmar prison. Mandatory vaccination or imposing a lockdown on people unvaccinated against COVID-19 raises human rights issues, and countries should consider those measures extremely carefully. The WHO technical lead for COVID-19, Maria van Kerkhove, warns that cases and deaths are increasing for the 4th week in a row globally. And Europe has again become the epicenter of the pandemic, prompting some countries to consider reintroducing restrictions in the run-up to Christmas and stirring a debate on whether vaccines alone are enough to tame COVID-19. The Royal Botanical Gardens in Kew in southwest London are illuminated with festive light. This is a day ahead of the welcoming of the public. This year's Christmas in Kew returns for its 9th year, with both old and new installations set to be lit by over 1 million lights. Organizers say that they could be more this year than last year. And in sports, Netherlands qualifies for the 2022 Football World Cup. The world champions France continue their winning streak in the ongoing qualifiers. And Wales has drawn with Belgium. Brazil and Argentina played out a goalless draw. So let's begin with the big news. Well, India hit back at Pakistan for misusing the United Nations platforms to propagate false and malicious propaganda against the country. This came in response to Pakistan after its representative had raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir in the UN Security Council during a debate on maintenance of international peace and security through preventive diplomacy. Dr. Kajal Butt, who is the counselor and also legal advisor at India's permanent mission in the United Nations, said that Pakistan has been globally recognized as a country that openly supports, trains, finances and arms terrorists as a matter of state policy. So India's deputy permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador R. Ravindra, had already actually delivered the national statement at the UNSC open debate. But what Butt has done is she took the floor to make a second statement in the council after Pakistan's ambassador to the UN, Munir Akram, had raked up the issue of Jammu and Kashmir in his remarks in the open debate.
Pakistan has an established history and policy of harboring, aiding and actively supporting terrorists. This is a country which has been globally recognized as one openly supporting, training, financing and arming terrorists as a matter of state policy. The entire Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh were, are and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India. This includes the areas that are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. We call upon Pakistan to immediately vacate all areas under its illegal occupation. India desires normal neighborly relations with all countries, including Pakistan. The onus is on Pakistan to create such a conducive atmosphere. Till then, India will continue to take firm and decisive steps to respond to cross-border terrorism.
Poland turned water cannons on migrants. This is at the border with Belarus. Now, NATO has reiterated that it supports Warsaw in this crisis that has left thousands stranded on the frontiers in icy temperatures in Poland. Here's a detailed report.
After Tuesday's standoff at the Poland-Belarus border between thousands of stranded migrants and the Polish border forces, a video published by Polish officials on Twitter shows that the crossing point compound has been cleared on the Belarusian side. The migrants are seemingly returning to their former makeshift camps located a few hundred meters further along the border line. For weeks, thousands of migrants, mostly from the Middle East, have been gathering at the Belarus border in an attempt to reach the European Union. Belarus has been accused of pushing migrants to the border to try to destabilize the EU, a charge it denies. The migrants, including children, have been living in makeshift camps in freezing conditions just inside Belarus. In recent days, thousands have converged on a crossing at Kuznica, south of Grodno, in northwest Belarus. Meanwhile, Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights Commissioner Dunia Mijatovic visited a migrant aid center near Poland's border with Belarus on Tuesday. Later, talking to reporters, Mijatovic said the behavior of Belarus regarding the issue of migrants camped at its borders with European Union member neighbors is unacceptable. She further said the situation is extremely complex and problematic as tensions continue between Belarus and nations including Poland, Latvia and Lithuania. Mijatovic called for de-escalation so that the suffering of migrants who are largely camped in freezing conditions in makeshift border camps can be alleviated.
The situation is evidently extremely complex and problematic. We can see enormous suffering of people that are left in limbo. It is absolutely unacceptable what Belarus is doing and how the people are manipulated. But at the same time, I think we need to step aside and think, what is happening at the European border. Why are these people left in limbo, and what can be done in order to stop this extremely dangerous situation? We need to find a way to de-escalate, to make sure that the focus is really to stop the suffering.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, meanwhile, said he was deeply concerned about how Belarus was putting the lives of vulnerable migrants at risk.
We are deeply concerned about the way the Lukashenko regime is using vulnerable migrants as a hybrid tactic against other countries, and this is actually putting the life of the migrants at risk, and it is a way of using people, instrumentalizing people in hybrid tactics against other countries. So we follow this very closely, and we stand in solidarity with Poland and other allies affected.
Earlier on Tuesday, Polish security forces turned water cannons on migrants who threw rocks across the Belarusian border, where thousands have gathered in a chaotic attempt to cross into the country from Belarus. An estimated 4,000 migrants are at the border, and many say Belarusian authorities are not allowing them to return to Minsk. The crisis has led the EU to prepare further sanctions against Belarus, which it accuses of attempting to destabilize the bloc by pushing migrants across the border illegally. World Today Desk, DD India.
Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, with over 3 decades experience as a senior Indian diplomat, in this discussion in the context of his being ambassador to Latvia, India's ambassador to Latvia. He had served as India's ambassador there, and he also held key positions in India's mission at the EU at Brussels. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sajanhar, for being with us. So the NATO says that it is a hybrid form of warfare, and it's, we know that Latvia, Lithuania, Poland seem to have the support of NATO, seem to have the support of most countries. What do you think? I mean, is this actually a hybrid form of warfare that Belarus has launched on the EU?
Well, that is what it appears, Mark. First of all, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes.
That is what it appears that Belarus, and for that matter, many people have also stated that possibly Russia is behind Belarus because Belarus could not have taken such an action without the support of Russia. And Belarus, of course, feels extremely aggrieved because it has been sanctioned by the European Union because of the elections. Alexander Lukashenko, he's come into power 6th time. There were lots of protests and demonstrations. There was rigging, vote rigging in the elections. It was fraudulent elections. That is what had been seen. His opponent in the elections last year had done, was expected to have done much better. But by force, Alexander Lukashenko has been able to continue in his position, and that is why there were all these huge, heavy sanctions that were imposed against him. And that is what is thought that Belarus is trying to do. It is trying to destabilize the European Union. It is trying to create problems, fissures, divisions as far as European Union is concerned. And so we have all these migrants who have come in thousands from the West Asian countries, from Iraq, from Syria, from Afghanistan. They have been brought to the borders of Belarus, and they are being pushed in. The situation has become, of course, much more grievous and critical because of the winter. And all these migrants, they are out in the open. And Alexander Lukashenko says that he is not to blame. But of course, getting all these plane loads, and apparently there have been advertisements in the press, in the media, in these countries, in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, etc., that this is the easiest way and the simplest way and the cheapest way of getting into Europe. So this is how the migrants have been lured to come to Belarus, and now they find themselves in these very difficult circumstances.
Indeed. So it has been a campaign, it looks like, and certainly a different route that they are using now, because the border in all these three countries, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, seems to be rather porous between Belarus and these countries, and it's an opportunity for Belarus to easily destabilize the EU, as you say. But now the larger game of destabilizing the EU itself. We can see that, one of the countries that left the EU, Britain, is not in support of anything like this. So, I mean, it looks like the EU seems to be getting enough support from all the other players, so Belarus could be isolated.
No, absolutely. Belarus definitely at the moment appears to be isolated. There has been some bit of differences of opinion as far as Poland and some of the older members of the European Union are concerned. But as far as this issue is concerned, the whole European Union has come together and is standing as a single bloc, as a bulwark against what Belarus and what many people seem to suggest what Russia is trying to do. Because they are trying to test the level of patience and also resilience as far as the European Union is concerned. So they are pushing back because they think that there is going to be an outcry as far as the human rights of these people is concerned, and the European Union and Poland and these countries, they will have to buckle under. But at the moment, and you showed in your report that yesterday on Tuesday there were also tear gas shells, there were also water cannons, and it is getting exceedingly cold. People are extremely hungry. Many of them are in the forests. They have nowhere to sleep. They have nothing to eat. There are reports that many of them have not had a full meal for the last several weeks. So I think these sort of horrendous reports are getting out, and of course they are very troubling. But so far, EU and even NATO, they are standing solidly behind Poland and Latvia and Lithuania.
But the point is that there are human rights issues involved, obviously, because you say the people have not had their food for a few days and it's extremely cold. You can't be putting water cannons on them. Now, the ultimate destination for these people who are migrants escaping conflict zones, most of them coming into this country, into the EU, is actually Germany. They are actually moving to Germany through the EU, and in fact even Germany has noticed this year that over 2,000 migrants who have come in this year have come in through this route. So, you know, I mean, ultimately, Germany has a policy towards accepting these migrants under the current times, and they don't want to stop that. And how do you think that's affecting the EU's, you know, whole refugee policy?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we had the refugees coming in, streaming in from Turkey,
Right.
you recall a few years ago, and then it was thought that there would be an equitable distribution as far as the refugees are concerned in different countries. That did not work out very well, because at that time Britain used to be a member of the European Union, and it put its foot down. It didn't want to receive very many refugees. Germany, of course, had opened its doors, but then Angela Merkel had to face the political backlash, because there were some incidents of violence and molestation around the time of Christmas in some of the cities, and they were the fingers were pointed at the refugees who had come. So I think there is Europe is also trying to come to terms with how many refugees to take. I think viewers would also know that there are countries like Sweden and those who have been very welcoming as far as refugees are concerned. But over recent years, they have also faced problems. They have also faced violence as far as these refugees are concerned, because they are not able to gel well with the domestic, with the local societies. So I think there is a churning, there is a rethinking as far as Europe is concerned, as to how to deal with the refugees, how to deal with these migrants. And here, when it appears that it is a political move by Russia and by Belarus, then of course it has strengthened the spine of the European countries, because they think that it is not because only the refugees want to come there, but because they are being used as human shields and human weapons. As you know, your first question, whether it is a form of hybrid warfare. And that is when the Europeans have come to realize that, then I think they have strengthened their resolve to stand unitedly and oppose this pushing into Europe by these migrants.
You know, the backlash that is that against the migrants within the European Union is in a way actually that's the outcome that Belarus wants. You know, I mean, you create this kind of tension, and then the liberal democratic nature of Europe, which is like a melting pot to some extent with its liberal policies after the union came into existence, it no longer exists. I mean, if it becomes a force that is basically trying to, let's say, more conservative, extremely conservative, to the point that it is more xenophobic.
Well, absolutely. I think this is the game plan as far as Belarus is concerned, and that is what you know, many of the critics, they are saying that you know, Europe has now been thinking that we are going to increase the sanctions as far as Belarus is concerned, because Belarus should be made to feel the pain what it is trying to inflict on Europe. But what people are suggesting is that if sanctions are to be imposed, they should be imposed not only against Belarus, but they should definitely be imposed against Russia also, because without the support, tacit and overt support of Russia, Belarus would not be able to do any of this. And in any case, Belarus has been able to come out of the very critical position that it found itself after the elections last year. It has been able to come out only because of the financial and political support and the moral support of Russia. So what Europe is saying is that basically it might be the Belarus might be in the front of it, but it is only a facade, and actually it is a game plan of Russia. This is what the Polish Prime Minister has said, that the mastermind behind all of this is Russia, and so action should be taken against Russia. Then only this it will be able, Europe will be able to control this. Of course, they're also trying, because you know, last year, as it is understood, there were just about 120 attempts, illegal attempts by migrants from Belarus to get into Europe. And this year already there have been more than 25,000 such people. And of course, over the last 1 year, when the weather has also become so very difficult, these about half of them have been over the last 1 month or so. Europe is, of course, trying to work out a deal with Turkey so that, the Belarus Air Belavia, which comes from Istanbul to Minsk, that they don't carry these migrants from Iraq, from Syria and Afghanistan. And they're also working with Iraq so that, Iraq Air also doesn't carry these migrants to Minsk. Okay. So maybe going forward, the numbers can be got limited. But of course, the problem of the 14,000 migrants who are already stationed on the border, that of course will continue to make this issue very complex and a big crisis for Europe.
Sure. So you say that some of the sanctions that have been imposed are quite severe, but also the government in the EU are basically trying to see that flights that come into Belarus from countries that they are sort of friendly with don't carry these kind of migrants in. But the question is that Belarus itself, their airspace has been under some sort of scanner because Lukashenko had stopped a flight, a Ryanair flight just a few months ago, and deboarded 2 people on that flight and then allowed it to take off once again. So I mean, that's the kind of control that that the government has in Belarus right now. So it requires the high-handedness of a government, or let's say, I mean, it has been called a dictatorship. It is a democracy, but as you did mention that there have been question marks about his election several times over. He's been ruling from 1994.
No, absolutely. I think it's a democracy only in name because, the reports that had come out from Belarus, if there had been free, fair, open, transparent election, there was no way that Alexander Lukashenko would have won the election. And you are very right. I think, when a country, and particularly at the instructions or the orders of the president of the country, can it is no less than a hijack, what you mentioned, the Ryanair flight. Yeah. It was using its airspace, and then there were fighters which came on the 2 sides and they escorted them to the Minsk airport, and one of the protesters who was against Lukashenko, who was traveling on that flight, he was deboarded, disembarked from there, and then the flight was allowed to continue. Meaning this is a gross violation of international law, of rule of law, and I don't think any, the international community should countenance this, should accept it as normal behavior, because otherwise then, globally, the rule of law will not be able to operate. But this is what Lukashenko is. If he can do this as far as an international flight is concerned, I think it one shudders to think as what he'll be able to do, what he must be doing as far as domestic aspects are concerned, issues are concerned, and acting against protests. And here we see that the migrants, they are boarded and they are being persecuted by the border guards, by the security guards, and they are being pushed to the border with Poland so that they will be able to go across the border. And we've seen there are horrendous accounts of people who have been able to,
those who return, they have been persecuted quite badly. Yes. Indeed. But let's talk a little bit about Lukashenko and, the concern that is rising about this high-handed behavior, and especially playing out in the context of the conflict that's going on. Because even at the Tokyo Olympics, one of their athletes was forced to return against her will, and that also raised an international incident. The issue is, is the world just watching this? Is there some way that Lukashenko is sending out a message of his power, or does he want, is he inviting conflict? What is he doing?
No, I think he's basically acting as a, in my view, as a cat's paw as far as Russia is concerned, because without Russia's support, of course, there are certain differences also between them, because you know, Russia supplies gas to Europe and it goes through Belarus. Belarus has been threatening that if you know, more sanctions are imposed on him, or if the sanctions that were imposed last year, they are not taken away, then he is going to stop the transit of gas through Belarus to Europe. And that is going to be, if it happens, it's going to be a big problem as far as Europe is concerned, again, because winter is already there. It is, it's not only approaching, it is arrived. It is the second half of November now. But Europe has heard what Belarus is saying, but I don't think they believe him. And even the advisor to President Putin, because if gas supplies are stopped there to Europe, then that is going to be a big blow as far as Russia is concerned. So the advisor to President Putin, Dmitry Peskov, has said that this is, you know, Lukashenko has said this without consulting Russia, and this is not going to happen. So I think Lukashenko is, you know, flexing his own muscle. He knows that Russia stands behind him, and that is what some of the other commentators are saying, that you know, taking action against Belarus is not really going to help. If you want things to become better, things to improve, then you have to see do something against Russia, which will have you know, deliver some pain to that. So this seems to be some sort of a game plan as far as Russia is concerned.
Indeed, and a final question then is that, you know, all the powers of the world, let's say the US, Britain and the EU in this conflict I'm talking about, have all basically questioned Belarus and, you know, expressed their consternation at what's happening. But over and above that, what can they do? I mean, you say that they have to act against Russia, and then what is that? Is this a game of escalation, and where is it going?
Yes, it could, you know, get escalated, and but I don't think any one of them is looking for a conflict. There might be a confrontation, but I don't think either of the two sides is looking for a conflict. Unfortunately, the victims in all this are the migrants. You are showing them on the screen, and I think their situation, their condition is heartrending. Now, what I understand is that today they have been taken, several of them have been taken behind the border. They have been put into some sort of a warehouse, and there is possibly some talk of their being repatriated to wherever they came from, because possibly Belarus is also finding that it is becoming very difficult to sustain this whole thing at the level at which it has been going. Because if there are fingers going to be pointed as far as the violation of human rights is concerned, their hunger, they're staying out in the cold, and many of them have died already because of the cold. If fingers are going to be raised against Europe, then definitely more fingers will be raised against Belarus as to what it has been up to. And then it will also, and Russia will also get drawn in. So maybe there is some bit of a rethinking and possibly maybe some sort of
Ambassador Sajanhar, you know, I mean, you have served in Latvia.
Not overt discussions, but behind the scenes, some sort of conversation going on between European Union and Belarus and Russia.
Ambassador Sajanhar, you served in Latvia, you worked in these areas. Tell me, how cold is it at this time of the year, and how colder is it going to get in winter? And what we've seen is already heartrending, but you know, what's likely to come for the next 2 months?
Well, I think December, Baltic Sea is going to freeze, and it's going to get extremely cold. So, you know, staying out in the open, and this border area between Belarus and Poland, this is studded with forest. There is a huge green cover. So also is it in Latvia and Lithuania. So it is going to get extremely cold. I think now it would be anything in the range of minus 10 degrees Celsius. So it is going to get worse than that as we go into December and the later part of the year.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sajanhar, for for your inputs and enlightening us on this important subject. Now, moving on then to our next story. The American journalist Danny Fenster returned home to the United States after spending more than 5 months in a Myanmar prison cell, and he got an emotional reunion with his family on his return to the United States after more than 5 months in a Myanmar prison cell.
American journalist Danny Fenster had an emotional reunion with his family on his return to the United States on Tuesday after more than 5 months in a Myanmar prison cell. Fenster was freed from prison in Myanmar and flew to Qatar on Monday following negotiations between former US diplomat Bill Richardson and the ruling military junta.
It was incredible. I mean, it's, right here, just about this right here.
I don't know. We did bring some.
Yeah?
But
Has he changed since you son?
we don't know any. My son Brian actually let us know because he knew, and it was just like a 1 million pound weight was lifted.
The United Nations hailed Fenster's release as a positive step, but called for at least 47 other journalists in detention to be freed immediately. Fenster was among dozens of media workers detained in Myanmar since February 1st coup that led to an outpouring of public anger over the military's abrupt end to a decade of tentative steps towards democracy. Myanmar's military has accused many media outlets of incitement and spreading false information. World Today Desk, DD India.
The fourth WHO Global Tobacco Trends report released on Tuesday showed that there are 1.3 billion tobacco users globally compared to 1.32 billion in 2015, and the number is expected to drop to 1.27 billion by 2025. Millions of lives have been saved by effective and comprehensive tobacco control under the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control and Empower. So the WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said it's very encouraging to see fewer people using tobacco each year. Now let's take a look at updates on COVID-19 from across the world. Well, the world COVID-19 cases have crossed 25 crore, 50 lakh. This is, of course, over the 2-year period from the beginning of this virus till now. And so far, more than 23 crore, 5 lakh people have recovered globally, and 51 lakh 29,000 lives have been lost to the disease. The US is the hardest hit by this virus, with the number of cases standing above 4 crore 81 lakh, and the death toll in that country has surpassed 7 lakh 86,000. Mandatory vaccination or imposing of a lockdown on those unvaccinated against COVID-19 raises human rights issues, and hence these are being considered with caution. So Austria imposed a lockdown on unvaccinated people as COVID infections are on the rise across Europe. Germany, in fact, is considering tighter curbs. Britain is also expanding its booster program to younger adults. Europe has again become the epicenter of the pandemic, prompting some countries to consider reintroducing of the restrictions in the run-up to Christmas, and also stirring a debate over whether vaccines alone are enough to tame COVID-19. France, Netherlands, many other countries in Eastern Europe are all experiencing a surge in infections. The WHO technical lead for COVID-19, Maria van Kerkhove, has warned that cases and deaths, they are increasing for the 4th week in a row globally. And top US infectious disease official Dr. Anthony Fauci said on Tuesday it's possible for COVID-19 to be reduced to an endemic illness from the current major health crisis next year if the US ramps up vaccination rates. He's talking about his country, of course, the US. Now, booster doses of COVID-19 vaccines are vital for reaching that point, Fauci said in an interview at the Reuters Total Health Conference, and he said that if the United States makes boosters available for everyone, it's possible for the US to get control of this virus by the spring of 2022.
Look at what's going on in Israel. Look what other countries are doing now about adopting a booster campaign virtually for everybody. I think if we do that and we do it in earnest, I think by the spring we can have a pretty good control of this. We will see that boosters are likely a very critical part of the immunization regimen and not a bonus or a luxury.
The Irish cabinet discussed new COVID-19 measures in response to a growing fourth wave. Ireland has imposed a state of semi-lockdown over rising COVID cases, putting in place a curfew for hospitality and urging people to work from home whenever possible. So the Restaurants Association of Ireland, they are calling on the government to trigger the reactivation of COVID recovery support scheme for hospitality that will be impacted by the new measures. Hospitality really being hit. Now, new COVID-19 cases have surpassed the daily average of 10,000 in France, double-digit percentage increases week on week since around mid-October. The Macron government, they have said that a lockdown is not on the horizon, but at a vaccination center in a Paris suburb of Saint-Quentin, many viewed the vaccine as the only way out of this crisis, because Europe has again become the epicenter, as we said, of the pandemic, prompting some of the countries to consider reintroducing restrictions in the run-up to Christmas, also stirring that debate on whether vaccines alone are enough to tame COVID-19. So Austria too has imposed a lockdown on people who are still unvaccinated against the coronavirus. And this move, in fact, comes as the winter approaches, the infections rise, and we're seeing this registered across Europe. Britain expanding its booster program to younger adults. Germany will likely impose tighter curbs. Around 2 million unvaccinated people in Austria have been placed in a lockdown as the country faces a surge in cases. Police in Vienna on Tuesday also carried out spot checks of shoppers. The COVID-19 vaccination status they were looking for as part of a national lockdown on the unvaccinated. In groups of 4, officers checked people walking in and out of shops and one of the capital's busiest streets. Austria imposed a lockdown on COVID unvaccinated people on Monday as winter approaches and infections rise across Europe. Germany is considering tighter curbs, as we said, Britain expanding its booster program to younger adults. And still with Austria and Salzburg, the preparations are being made for a triage scheme. So the rapidly increasing number of corona patients that's threatened to overload the intensive care units in this country. And so what's happened is that a 6-person triage team is now going to decide in an emergency which patients are given intensive care. So in Austria, the numbers have been rising for weeks in terms of infections as well as intensive care units, and Salzburg is currently recording more than 1,500 new infections per 100,000 inhabitants. That's the highest among Austrian provinces, and Upper Austria too is not far behind. It has more than 1,400.
I believe the reaction was very emotional, so I would like to address it specifically that we have set up a triage commission. I believe that is proactive and also reasonable. The overall majority in intensive care units are unvaccinated people who unfortunately do not have any kind of previous medical history. We are a democratic, wonderful, fantastic country, and I believe we owe our solidarity to others like those who can't be vaccinated or who have no possibility to get protection from a vaccination. People we unfortunately also see in intensive care units, those who received transplants and who are infected and who die there. It's not their fault.
Vice President Venkaiah Naidu inaugurated Bengaluru Tech Summit 2021. The Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison attended the event virtually. The Karnataka Governor Thawar Chand Gehlot, the Union Minister for Railways, Communications, Electronics and IT, Ashwini Vaishnav, and the State Chief Minister Baswaraj Bommai attended the event, and more than 30 countries are participating in this 3-day-long summit. The Bengaluru Tech Summit, it will feature multi-track conferences, a business-to-business expo, international exhibitions, conclave of thought leaders, opportunities for startups to showcase their innovations. And the Vice President said that the summit is the confluence of the best minds. It is sure to bring innovation.
No wonder that almost every major tech company in the world has Indian senior leadership. This speaks of the intelligence, knowledge, success, achievement here in this land. And we need to share it with others. And in the coming days, we should encourage more and more on knowledge economy, digitization, to innovation. Our country is going through the Digital India program. We have made remarkable progress in Aadhaar transformation, the direct benefit transfer, and availability of various government services to the people.
The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison attended the event virtually. He said that technology is at the forefront of the comprehensive strategic partnership between India and Australia. He announced that Australia is establishing a consulate general as well in Bengaluru.
India is a major technology power, and technology is at the forefront of the comprehensive strategic partnership which Prime Minister Modi and I signed last year. We're already making great progress. We're also cooperating on space science, technology and research. And Australia is proud to be supporting India's inspirational Gaganyaan human spaceflight mission. We're deepening our education and research links also, vital to technological cooperation. Our countries are also working with the United States and Japan through the Quad Leaders Dialogue. This is about 4 like-minded democracies coming together from our region to show we can make a positive difference in addressing our region's biggest challenges.
And the Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, he said that India is one of the biggest economies in the world with vast expertise. He also said that the combination of innovation and entrepreneurship has the potential to do great things.
A couple of weeks ago, I met with my dear friend, Prime Minister Modi, and we discussed the many ways that we can take Israel-India relations to the next level, especially a future technological collaboration between our countries, which can turn our great partnership into a powerhouse of innovation. India is one of the biggest countries in the world, with one of the biggest economies in the world, and vast digital expertise. And Israel is one of the leading innovation nations of the world, the startup nations. When Indians and Israelis come together, amazing things happen. I hope to travel to India pretty soon and see what else the future holds for us.
Well, the annual flagship IT event, the Bengaluru Tech Summit, began today and it will run on till the 19th of this month, and over 30 countries are participating in the summit, as we said. So speaking to DD India, the Biocon chairperson, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, said that research-linked incentives are an important focus policy for government, and she said that apart from being software capital of India, Bengaluru is also emerging as the software capital of the world. Listen to this exclusive conversation.
Asia's largest IT event, Bangalore Tech Summit, is starting here at Bangalore. To talk more about this Bangalore Tech Summit and what it means for biotech industry, I have with me Kiran Majumdar-Shaw. How do you see this innovations taking biotechnology to a new level?
What we need to focus on in biotechnology is research and innovation. And so one of the big discussions we are having right now with the government is research-linked incentives. Very similar to the production-linked incentives, we think research-linked incentives ought to be the very important focus in terms of policy.
How do you see, ma'am, this entire indigenization of the India-made vaccine now accepted across the world?
I think vaccines is something we invested in a long time ago, and we are reaping the benefits of being able to vaccinate such a large population thanks to the capacities that have been built and also thanks to the speed at which we developed vaccines in the country. In addition to that, of course, India is being called the pharmacy of the world, but I think we must focus on also biopharma manufacturing, because that's a very different set of skills.
The government is giving a push to the startups as well. In biotech sector, how are they placed? What are the opportunities for the youngster?
VC community at long last has actually realized the importance of investing in biotechnology, and so we are seeing fund flows coming into a number of these areas.
How do you see Bangalore emerging as the Silicon Valley of India? What changes have you seen in these 2 decades in showcasing the technology and Bangalore as Silicon City of India?
Well, I think Bangalore has already emerged as the software capital of the country, one of the software capitals of the world. I think we are also emerging as one of the scientific capitals of the world. And I think that actually augurs very well for Bengaluru. So anyone coming into India, obviously their first port of call is Bengaluru. And until we really speed up our metro projects and other mobility projects, we will find it very difficult to accommodate the huge influx of population that will come into Bangalore because of these technological strengths that we have.
Thank you very much for talking to Doordarshan. That was Kiran Majumdar underlining the importance of the emergence of new technologies in the biotech sector, and Bangalore emerging as a hub of not only for IT but also for biotechnology and research, and with India making a mark with the making of vaccines post the pandemic, biotech is all set to reach larger heights. With cameraman Subhash, Asha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
Well, let's take a look now at some news from across the world in News at a Glance.
Two people died and 31 were injured after a heavy truck veered off the road and crashed into several vehicles in Peru on Tuesday. According to local media, the truck driver lost control of the vehicle, hitting 2 passenger buses, one head-on and indirectly colliding into 2 others on the central highway of Cupiche sector in the Huarochiri province. Emergency crews pulled the bodies from the crash site and rushed survivors to a nearby hospital. According to local media, the deadly victims are in their 40s and 50s. 3 minors are among those injured. They are recovering in the hospital from moderate injuries. The daughter of one of the victims blamed incompetent drivers for the tragedy. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Burkina Faso's capital on Tuesday, demanding President Roch Kabore resign for failing to rein in militants that roam the north and east and last weekend killed 28 soldiers and 4 civilians. Sunday's attack was the worst suffered by troops during a 4-year Islamist insurgency that has killed thousands and forced over 1 million people to flee their homes. In Uganda, nearly 3 people killed and over 30 others injured in a suicide blast in capital Kampala. The attacks were conducted by 3 suicide bombers who blew themselves up near Parliament and the city's police headquarters. The explosions sent members of Parliament and others rushing for cover as cars burst into flames in the latest in a wave of bomb attacks. The attacks came within 3 minutes of each other. More bombs have been found in other parts of the city. Police said intelligence indicated the Islamic State allied democratic forces were responsible. More people were urged to leave their homes on Tuesday, and officials in a small Washington city near the Canada border are calling the damage devastating after the storm that dumped rain for days caused flooding and mudslides. Suma's city officials said on Tuesday on Facebook that hundreds of people had been evacuated, and they estimated that 75% of homes had water damage in a soaking that reminded people of Western Washington's record severe flooding in November 1990, when 2 people died and there were more than 2,000 evacuations. Additionally, 6 railroad cars that had been sitting on tracks in a BNSF rail yard in Sumas derailed in the flooding on Tuesday. Trains in that location and others will not be running until water recedes and debris is removed and tracks are inspected. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, the Netherlands qualified for the 2022 Football World Cup, and world champions France continue their winning streak in the ongoing qualifiers. Wales drew with Belgium. Brazil fought out a goalless draw with Argentina. Here's our report.
The Netherlands has qualified for the 2022 Football World Cup. In a World Cup qualifier, the Netherlands won a World Cup ticket after beating Norway 2-0 in a Group G match. Both the goals of the match were scored in the last minute of the second half. The Dutch team played an aggressive game in the second one. Steven Bergwijn scored in the 86th minute of the match to put the Netherlands 1-0 ahead. With this win, the team has topped Group G with 23 points. World champions France have continued their winning streak in the ongoing qualifiers for next year's Football World Cup in Qatar. In the match played late on Tuesday, France managed to beat Finland by 2-0. France, who's already qualified for the World Cup, maintained their dominance throughout the match. However, neither team could score in the first half. In the 66th minute of the match, experienced Karim Benzema scored a goal from Mbappe to put the team 1-0 ahead. And after 10 minutes, Mbappe managed to score a goal while maintaining his excellent form. With this win, France retained the top spot in Group D with 18 points. In another World Cup qualifier, world number 1 Belgium had to be content with a 1-1 draw with Wales. After this draw, Wales will now have to play in the playoffs to qualify for the World Cup. Belgium star midfielder Kevin De Bruyne scored in the 12th minute to put the team 1-0 ahead. In the 32nd minute, Moore brought Wales level with a goal. Neither team could score in the second half. Belgium has already qualified for the World Cup. The match between Brazil and Argentina in the South American World Cup qualifier ended in a goalless draw. Throughout the match, both the teams were seen trying to score goals. After this match was drawn, Brazil remains on top while Argentina is in second place. With this, both the teams have also maintained their invincible streak. Argentina team is unbeaten from 27 matches. Brazil is the only team in the South American group to have qualified for the World Cup so far. Bolivia beat Uruguay 3-0 in the South American qualifier itself. After this defeat, it has become very difficult for Uruguay to qualify for the World Cup. Sports Desk, DD India.
Well, let's now take a look at Beyond the Headlines.
Israeli startup firm Redefined Meat has expanded operations into Europe, where it hopes to reach thousands of restaurants by the end of next year, and served for the first time its plant-based whole cuts of alternative meat. The 3D printed beef substitute was rolled out in Israel as well as Germany, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. A mix of soy and pea protein, chickpeas, beetroot, nutritional yeasts and coconut fat, it mimics flank steak, which is also known as bavit. The company, which until now worked with about 150 restaurants in Israel, said the whole cuts will broaden the appeal of alternative meat products that have mostly been limited to ground beef dishes, including hamburgers and sausages. Australia's Hunter Valley winemakers toasted the return of guests to their wineries as people gained confidence travelling regionally after the COVID-19 lockdown that grasped New South Wales for months. At Savannah Estate, tables were full with people enjoying Hunter Valley wine, experiencing wine tastings and stocking up on supplies. Sydney emerged from over 100 days of lockdown on October 11, with restaurants and cellar doors still operating under patron limits. Still, fifth-generation winemaker and owner of Ivano Wines, Stephen Drayton, said the COVID-imposed guidelines have actually helped streamline the cellar door experience for their guests. North Korean kindergarten introduced various extracurricular activities to get a head start in nurturing talent in their young students. In a video released by North Korea's official news agency KCNA, young children were seen participating in various activities including dance, guitar and calligraphy classes after their regular academic lessons at Mahang Kindergarten. Students were seen wearing face masks during most of the activities except for singing and dance classes. From a back-flipping gymnast to ball control tricks to a man pulling a car while walking on his hands, this year's Guinness World Records Day is as colorful as ever. Talent from around the world have smashed all kinds of records for the 18th annual Guinness World Records Day. The British gymnast broke his own record for the farthest back flip between two horizontal bars when he managed to propel himself 6 meters through the air. Meanwhile, in China, balanced on his hands, Zhang Shuang pulled a car for 50 meters in just 1 minute and 13.27 seconds, the fastest time to date. Other winners include American Tyler Fly Phillips. The 21-year-old broke the record for most consecutive cars jumped over on a pogo stick after he bounced over 5 stationary black cabs in London. Parisians enjoyed the annual Christmas decorations of the capital's most famous department stores on Monday, while the country grapples with a new surge in COVID-19 cases. Families and passers-by crowded the sidewalks in front of the galleries, in front of the Galeries Lafayette and Printemps stores, as automated figures mined fake gold or held bottles of Chanel perfume. The Royal Botanical Gardens in Kew, southwest London were illuminated with festive light a day ahead of welcoming the public. This year's Christmas at Kew returns for its 9th year, with both old and new installations set to be lit by over 1 million lights. Organizers say there could be more than this figure for this year. In addition to returning and popular installations such as Fire Garden with over 150 heads of fire and the Christmas Cathedral that is made up of a 30-meter long promenade of LED vines, the 2021 event showcases brand new sites. Over 25 km of cable has been used throughout the trail. This year's trail is 2.5 km long and has 14 installations and 3 light shows. Over 100 people have been involved in putting the trail together. Visitors can also see Father Christmas and his elves, as well as enjoy traditional rides and festive treats. World Today Desk, DD India.
That's the World Today. Thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.